Hey, everybody. Simone, John, and Bella here for another Architecture of the Soul conversation. This is our 5th episode in our discussion. And if you've been following along, what we set out to do was to have a conversation around our dinner table and invite whoever wanted to show up and have the conversation we wanted to have. So if you're with us, we know you wanted to join us at the table, and we're so glad that you're with us. And if you have questions, post them in the chat and we'll bring them into our conversation. So just before we get started, let's remember that John teaches Awakening the Heart and the Science of Ascension. Bella, you can find with the Living Matrix, Unlock Your Design, and the 64 Doors. And I'm your soul whisperer, your resident soul whisperer, and so excited to have this conversation tonight. Before we popped on, we were having a conversation about where we wanted to start. And it was so interesting. We started with this conversation because I love what John teaches, which is the science of ascension. And we were talking about how the word science can help ground conversations like these. And John, I loved what you said. Why don't you jump in?
Yeah, it's a wonderful conversation to have, particularly at the current state of human consciousness that we're experiencing as a group. Over particularly the last, I don't know, maybe 150 years or so, our experience around the word science itself has shifted a great deal. And this was important for the development of our societal structure, where we began to create governments that were divorced from religion. So rather than having a religious belief system being the governance for our society, we began to separate that idea and say that religion should be free for all humans to choose. At least that's something that we said here in the United States. And because of that, science developed a more and more objective idea of reality. And I say objective with quotes, because the deeper that we got into our understanding of how we perceive reality by studying science, by using the evidence that we're able to gather to either support theories or prove them, science has moved further and further and further away from the experience of spirituality. But what we were talking about is that science itself, the study of reality, began with a fascination with the spiritual element of human experience. Most of the scientists of the previous ages, whether you're talking about Leonardo da Vinci or you're talking about I don't even know how to say his name properly, Hermes Trismegistus. He's one of those like esoteric, the originator of the Hermetic sciences. They were approaching it from the standpoint of
It looks like we might have lost John there.
Yeah, there is something with the internet connection from the beginning, right? Or am I the only one seeing?
Yeah, it was a little blurry for me too. While we wait for John, though, Bella, what about you? What about, what do you think about the connection between science and what we do?
I think it's just a matter of time. Well, now is it back? Let's see. I think it's just a matter of time. Anything, I'm going to take human design and the neutrino stream as an example. it wasn't measurable when Ra was here and spoke about it, but then it became measurable. So I for me it's a matter of time. And I have, speaking with human design again, my motivation is the second line. So it's all about, if it's scientific, I kind of believe less in it because I know it can be manipulated. When I have an inner knowing of something, then I trust it more. But that's my personal view. But then I know that often we need to underpin what we're speaking about. So I do appreciate that some people have that drive to investigate and to have the proof of things. I'm not that person. I'm much more based on the inner knowing, and the great mystery is much more interesting to me than the science. And where do you find yourself on that spectrum? I feel, from kind of one extreme to another, Simone.
Yeah, just because I know a lot of your work is helping people connect human design and the gene keys. And so, like you mentioned with human design, it's the neutrino field. And it wasn't, we didn't know about that when Rob brings in the information, and now we do. And also with the amino acids, in Gene Keys, Richard Rhodes says, we're unlocking our DNA. That's science. And there is an identical amino acid with each of the gene keys. And so we have that connection to science. For me, I enjoyed learning about quantum physics because, especially I found with male clients, it helped them, that I could talk about, hey, John.
Hey there.
It helps when I have male clients that I understand basic quantum physics, and I, can explain how I feel like, I'm operating in waveform and accessing waveform. And that seems to help some people. And I think, there are other clients, I have clients that there are a lot of words, in terms of, I think part of our conversation that is so fascinating is that from the very beginning, when you had the brainchild to bring us together to the table to have this conversation, one of the things you said to me was that we were all talking about the same thing, but just using different words. And I love those entry points because what I find with clients is that there are words that trigger people, and there are words that, don't trigger people. And your trigger depends on, what your experiences and what your culture is. So I have some clients who would not hear anything I said if I used the word God, but they can accept any other number of words, and so we use different words based on where we were born, what we learned, what our vocabulary is, where we went to school, what our experiences are. And I find that having the range of rhetorical capacity just helps us reach, the people who need to have the conversation or the wisdom come through. So that's one of the reasons why I like the way John phrases the science of ascension, because I know I have a lot of clients who would really relate to that come from, whereas I have other clients who would really relate to awakening the heart, because they're really heart embedded. And then that's a way that they can rhetorically connect. I have friends who, and I have clients who I've introduced to the Gene Keys, and some of them are into human design, and they really don't really resonate with the Gene Keys. And then I have other people I know who I've shared the Gene Keys with, and they really resonate with that. But then they'll say things like, well, I was introduced to human design a long time ago, and it just didn't resonate with me. And so it's like, what word? How is the trigger? Where's the vibration that helps the person receive the vibration that awakens their DNA, their heart, or whatever. That's why I love our conversation.
Yeah, and I think I just kind of going back on what I said before. I remember in high school, I think it was in high school, we have to choose if you do like humanistic, which was languages, and the other one was scientific. And I remember that's scientific, they say, then you kind of know the whys. You don't just have the formula in math. You actually know how to make the formula. And for me, that's why I chose that, because I don't just want a formula. I want to know where it comes from. So it's kind of saying, yeah, I'm intuitive, but I also know that the same way that I explain to everybody that I work with why is human design and gene keys the same, and I show them in relationship to astrology where the mathematical calculations come from. And many people might not feel like you need that, but for me, just to tell you the systems are the same, just different languages, is not enough for me. I want to go down, I want to go to the basics of it and show you why it's the same and where it comes from. So yeah, I see that, you know, the reason, the scientific, the explanation can be, it's very foundational and can be a really good kind of starting point for us to actually want to understand more and actually open the door for seeing that there is something tangible there that we can actually, yeah, I agree.
I think it's one of the stories that I have about my life is that when I was in school, math and science were not my subjects. I struggled and I tried so hard because being a good student was important to me. But it was just like the only math that was easy for me was geometry, and I aced geometry, you know. But chemistry, I couldn't memorize anything to save my soul, and biology, I couldn't stand cutting open an animal. It just it killed me. And even math, I think that I filled in the blanks, when you take the ACT and the SAT, I literally drew a picture because I was like, this is hopeless. And I was placed into honors, like calculus, and I was like, no, this is wrong. I drew a picture. I didn't look at those questions. But then later on in life, it wasn't for me to engage with that material. And I think it's because so much has come out since I was in school, and we've learned so much. And when I finally came back to science, and I was my career in academia, I was in the science building, even though I taught writing and literature. And my colleagues had PhDs in physics and chemistry, and I was studying quantum physics, and I would be reading my textbooks, and I had no idea I couldn't have done the math, but I got the theories. And when I doubted myself, I'd just go over with my book to one of my colleagues, and I would say, I think this is what this is saying. And they're like, how you know that without knowing the math is beyond us, But it was just it was like suddenly the math and the science clicked for me. And I think it was because of the evolution. And for my soul, it wasn't to know that other stuff. It wasn't, when I could resonate with it, it all suddenly made sense. So
I particularly enjoy this conversation because of how it ties into the subject that have been talking about, is the architecture of the soul. And when I first began having an interest in all of these variety of topics, whether it was about quantum physics or it was about yogic sciences or metaphysical experiences, esotericism, whatever it was, what really interested me was this idea that I had a soul purpose, not an SOLE purpose, but an SOUL purpose, that there was a specific intention of an aspect of myself that I had no awareness of, that I was like this, this extension of this great divinity that had no idea what the heck it was doing here. And I began to realize that, okay, well, if I am this sort of blocked off extension where I can't know my whole self, at least in this moment, maybe someday I will, but in this moment I won't. I've come with a certain languaging preferences. And those preferences, whether it's that, oh, I think in mathematical terms, oh, I think in quantum physics terms, oh, I like to think in terms of crystals and rituals and all of that sort of stuff. personally, crystals and rituals are not really my thing. I'm super into the science of crystals, and I I love that part of it. But like doing rituals and like, it's kind of like, not really for me.
Mhm.
But so these methods of expression that we resonate with help us come more and more closely into a state of consciousness where that soul awareness has somewhere that it can look into our world.
Mm.
And one of the things that I've been noticing that's going on, particularly this year, before 2020, I at the very end, the end of December of 2020, I was finishing a program that I had received from a mystical experience on a mountain that I called the Rainbow Bridge Ascension Training.
Mhm.
And it was energetically for the purpose of establishing a pathway that we can use to bridge the difference between our incarnate, sort of 3D experience and this soul awareness.
Mhm.
And I finished the year kind of going like, all right, guys, with on my social media, I was saying like, okay, this is going to be a big year. A bunch of stuff is going to fall apart, and this is the year to really evolve. And so, if you want some assistance, I want to be able to help you with this. And at the time, I had no idea what was going to be happening. I just could feel that something was up. And now here we are halfway through 2020, and COVID-19 happened. That was preceded by like, it looked like we might go to war with Iran. Um, like there's this running joke on going around that we have like crazy 2020 bingo cards where, it's like, can you check off what's the next crazy thing that's going to happen this year? And what I'm really seeing happen is people are beginning to come to terms with the understanding of quantum reality. In the past, we were able to say for certain that if we could see and observe something and use the appropriate testing mechanisms and sort of things, we could all arrive at the exact same truth and say, this is what's real. But now everybody has got their own, murder hornets, somebody commented. Now everybody's got their own idea about what the truth is. There's people running around who believe that Donald Trump is a divine plant here to assist with the enlightenment of humanity. Other people are pretty sure that he's the Antichrist. And the entire spectrum in between. And this is not just for the president, but for our race relations in this country, for whether to wear a mask or not wear a mask during this time. Like, everybody's got their own version of the truth. And how does that relate to quantum science? Well, quantum science reveals that you cannot observe the result of an experiment without affecting the same result.
The observer effect. Yeah.
Exactly. And what that means is that your participation in the experiment actually changes the outcome of that result. And so here we are looking at this variety of different truths that we could resonate with, or we could experience a great deal of conflict with. And we're beginning to have this opportunity to say, you know what? I'm going to choose the truth that I resonate with and see how does that change my results? And I mean, this is unprecedented because humanity, as far as I know, has never done this on a collective level. You know, like where everybody is basically going like, well, I think it's this way. I mean, yeah, in the past, people always disagreed about things, but it's never had this degree of like, hey, I live in my own universe, you live in yours type of seeing things. So all of that, I think, is to say that as a collective, you can see this movement into realities, the creation of realities where the expression of that soul essence is becoming more and more possible as people are refining and honing in on things. And, you know, Simone, you were great at geometry, but you said, I have no idea what's going on in calculus when you got there. You know, it's not like we can't learn new things. It's not like you're incapable of learning calculus. But one of your natural expressions was through geometry. You could already understand and translate geometry in the world and use it you could apply it into your experience directly because part of your soul was already awake in that knowledge, you know? And I personally believe that the more people who are able to truly embrace and awaken to their own inner reality of that soul essence, the more fulfilling the experience of being alive in a physical body is going to become for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Bella, what are you thinking as John goes through that, shares that?
I mean, for me, it's amusing, and it's this amazing time to be alive, where we have been speaking for like 30 years or more. I mean, more than think about Napoleon Hill and these people, you know, born to be rich or whatever, you're creating your reality. And now we are in that place where we are creating realities and like realizing that there is no one reality. So for me, I do really feel like it's an exciting time to be alive, and I do even see that some of the cracks are. Yeah, I don't think the cracks are really showing destruction. I think that those are cracks in a veil that before we were even afraid of make that veil crack, but now we're coming up to a level of awareness where we're ready for the veil to fall away. So that's the short answer.
I've been really thinking about what the density of consciousness said last time we talked about how we could be in the same room and be having a completely different experience, which ties right back to what we're talking about right now with everything that's going on in our world. People are choosing their reality, or another way to say it is what layer of consciousness they want to vibrate in, and how they want to, where they want to modulate their vibration at. So then where they're going to resonate with and what layer of consciousness, which is fascinating to me. And you can literally be in the same room, you know?
Yeah, that aspect of what we're all experiencing is like, to me, that what you're saying is exactly like where we all want to be. But for me, what I've found so irritating for so long is that there's been I can't say that I'm irritated about the conversation itself. I'm very happy about it. The conversation around raising your vibration, because that's been something that's been thrown around for maybe 20 or 30 years at this point, that anyone who was sort of spiritually new age, whatever bent since maybe 1990 or so, was aware of this idea that, hey, we have a vibration and we can increase, we can make it get bigger. And there's all these sort of opportunities that we have to learn about the laws of the universe, the laws that are governing the reality that we experience. And people will say, oh, well, if you want more money, you want more love, you want more this, you want more that in your life, all you have to do is raise your vibration. And it's kind of like, okay, well, how do I do that? And some people who give that advice are really good at saying, like I had for a very long time, I followed Abraham Hicks quite a lot because I quite enjoyed the vibration of the languaging that was coming through Esther Hicks. Mm-hmm. And I love her work because she gives all that whole body of work. All it is like little ways that people can go about raising their vibration, right? Mm-hmm. But it also is kind of tedious. It's like, if I want to be satisfied in my life, like I have to do these weird exercises of like trying to conjure up appreciation for things that I don't actually appreciate. And, essentially of what ends up happening is these ways to raise your vibration, they end up being obstacles to raising your vibration because they show you things about yourself and the vibration that you're currently choosing. If somebody says to you like, here, I'm going to help you write a list of 10 things that you're grateful for today. And you're sitting there going like, oh man, today's actually been really crappy. Like I woke up on the wrong side of the bed. My car broke down. Like the events in your life are really not going your way or helping you to feel better. So you kind of like go around like searching for something to be grateful for. And you're like, well, I'm not grateful for any of this stuff. and then we can start making this experience of, well, I'm not the way I ought to be. And one of the things about our conversation with this archetypal intelligence of the soul level of human consciousness is that idea never arises within the context of the soul architecture, those dimensions of 4, 5, and 6, that higher self realm of expanded consciousness that we've been discussing, that encompass divine love, compassion, and unification. And that idea that you are not what you ought to be is just not part of it at all. And from my perspective, having this conversation, I've gotten to even witness where some of my perspective is based on these lower dimensional structures of like, how can I? One of the things about science is often that we tear things apart into their components. What is an apple but a collection of minerals and vitamins and fiber? And how do we deconstruct it to understand it? And how can we use that deconstruction to generate health within ourselves? Well, looking at our own selves in the same manner, we can say, okay, well, what's going on at my first dimensional? What's going on in my physical body? Do I have a healthy physical body? Well, not entirely. I can point to a few things. And then we can go about and say, well, what about my emotional body? Are those, let me focus on my emotions, because those are the things that seem to be bothering me right now. Or maybe it's that, man, I just have this running stream of thoughts going through my mind all the time that I can't turn off. How do I stop my mind from thinking these negative thoughts all the time? And when we break down our systems into these various things, we're often missing the whole picture. Where oftentimes, if we have thoughts running through our minds, we can find, and many people have found this to be true, that if they would exercise every day, those thoughts kind of turn off. It's why people get addicted to long distance running. Because after a while, it's just gone. Right? And same thing with the emotions, is that, if you have a stressful week, you can really like blow off some steam by engaging your physical body, by going skiing I live in Colorado, that's filled with these weekend warriors who, Friday rolls around and they leave at 12 noon to go skiing up in the mountains, and they come back in like 5 hours of traffic on Sunday, so they can go back to work. It's like, why would people do that? Like, why would you involuntarily do this thing where, a 2.5 hour journey is like doubled or tripled because of traffic? Well, because that experience of releasing all of that pent up emotion is so important to us for our experience of well-being, for our experience of joy. And yeah, that's kind of one of the things that's really been, I don't know, permeating my thoughts from our conversation so far, is just, how can I approach the aspects of myself in this higher dimensional layers from a perspective of wholeness, where where I don't have to know all the little steps of each thing that has to happen in order to make it all come out. Now, I'm particularly interested in that stuff just because I love mechanics, but the importance of that wholeness has been really kind of, that's something I've been really taking away from this conversation. So, Simone, I'm actually curious about, you've mentioned in our conversations that oftentimes, because of the focus of your gift,
Mm-hmm.
when we're having these discussions,
Mm-hmm.
You're often not even aware of the questions that Bella and I are asking.
That's true.
And you're kind of like, I don't know what they asked, but you're already experiencing the answer from the intelligence, and you jump into describing it. And in my experience, your descriptions are so clearly expressing the intention of this intelligence, because the answers are they're always right on for the questions. So, what I'm curious about is like your experience of doing this work.
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times when like for me, if I were to show up to our conversation, I'd be like, man, I'd like some more answers, you know? I'm curious to hear about the experience of fulfillment that you have in doing this work when you're not even aware of the question. You know, because to me, what that means is that you're not doing it because you want some answers. You're doing it for some other reason. And because this gift, I perceive your gift as one that is synonymous with these layers of our soul. Mm. We have the five physical senses that we experience, and at the soul level, we have more senses that we're able to that are similar to our five senses in terms of seeing, hearing, touching, all of those things, but they exist in a different plane, in a different way. So anyways, I'm because we're talking about soul architecture and you're kind of engaging in this process of doing soul work, I'm curious to hear more about your fulfillment and what your experience is like around all of that.
Well, I feel so profoundly blessed, and I know when I'm doing this work, I am doing my soul purpose, and it's the wholeness of me. And I talked to Bella, and I've talked about this a lot, because I say to her all the time, oh, I want to work with you on that because you ask good questions. I don't have to be the question asker. I don't have to do this alone. And the more powerful the community I'm in who's asking the questions, then I know that the answers are going to lift us all up. Even if I don't remember the answer, I'm in the vibration of it. Mm-hmm. It will be with me forever. I don't have mm-hmm. to. I don't have to remember the words. The vibration's in me when I do it. And so I just don't get caught up on those details. But I am well aware that when I work with people who ask good questions, the wisdom that comes through, like when you say their soul level senses, like I'm dying for you to ask the density of consciousness to talk to us about soul level senses. Like, wow. Exciting to me. That's a good question. But, it kind of relates to what you were saying. And I want Bella to talk to this, because when I first started working with Bella, and we were bridging the gap between human design and gene keys, and it relates to the point you were making about not separating. One of the things I really admire about Bella, because we're personal friends and we're colleagues, is that the way that she talks about things, it's not from a place of separation. It's not, when something, let's say something happens, somebody might say something went wrong or something, there's a challenge of sorts. She's able to look at it through human design and gene keys in such an objective way that it doesn't cause separation. It is an awareness of the levels of consciousness within the person. She knows my gene keys so well, my human design so well. And when one of the mind-blowing sessions that I had with her was when last summer we did my path of sacred union within myself in terms of my design. And that completely changed me, that session. And in a nutshell, my path to sacred union within myself is communication, lightheartedness, and grounding. And so if I'm too serious and I'm not lighthearted, I'm not the wholeness of me. I'm not in union with myself. And having those touchstones of lightheartedness, communication, and grounding, I taught communication for my whole career. And, my work, even though I go to spirit, my work is, I know the more grounded I am, the more I can go, going out to me is really going in, so opening up is really opening within, it's really, and I'd like Bella to kind of chime in here, because for me, my human design is my gift. I mean, when she started looking at my chart, it was like, she's like, you this is what you were designed to do. And that was the geometry of that was, Bella, I'm gonna jump in.
Yeah, we have spoken about that before when we're speaking about completely open centers in human design, and you having your soul, your identity crystal or diamond completely open, and that you don't have a judgment about what's coming through. That's why even in one way, yeah, you are open to any question, and then the purity. When I'm speaking about the innocence of the completely open centers, so there is no judgment, and that's what you have in your design. And I feel like what you were saying before and what John was speaking to when we're speaking about the wholeness, it's what I am feeling like, going back to Napoleon Hill and like Bob Proctor and whoever those people, the secret people are, is that it is about so many times about fixing, about raising your frequency, and then we come from a place of separation. And part of what I was saying before too, speaking about human design, having that motivation of hope, the transference, the part like when you are in the not self, it's about wanting to fix. And that's what I feel when we come from that over scientific view. Often we are here to fix something, and really what we are speaking about in these conversations, and when we are tapping into the density of layer 4, 5, and 6, there we don't come from a place of problem. And that's why I like when you said that, John, because I sometimes get exhausted by Abraham or these things, like where it feels, and the more I can just allow, embrace, and accept, which is Richard Rudd in a nutshell, the art of contemplation, the more I am able to melt those layers, the first 3 layers that kind of like to kind of point at each other and thinking the other one is the problem, the physical, the emotional, the mental. The more I just can be in the fullness of that, that's when naturally I am just moved. It's all a dense frequency, man. That's when I'm naturally moved into the layers 4, 5, and 6, and then they looking from that place, then there is no separation between 1, 2, and 3. So that's why I'm so happy that we are highlighting again with different language. The way John is saying is one way, the way we look at it in your design, Simone, is one way, and the way I speak about it is one way. But it's about that wholeness and the non-judgment of what we perceive from our, from the density of like 3D, that something is wrong and something is. That's where I really feel like we are starting to move into a new way of moving beyond that is so different from what we can perceive in a 3D world with a 3D mind, because then it looks like we have to do something about it. And that's the same thing with COVID or whatever. We think we have to do something. We think we need a vaccine. We think like there's all this pent up energy about what should we do when we have to lock down. And there is something magical here that I feel like we are discovering together. It's, again, sacred union, doing, being, feminine, masculine, extremes, right and left. That's what you're speaking to as well, John. And that's where we are having the opportunity to do new observations that can bring us to more clarity and more wholeness than ever before. Is my perception.
I love that, and I love how you just made the connection between how Richard, the art of contemplation, ties to y'all may remember I was channeling, so you may was accessing the vibration of the density of consciousness, but I remember that they said something like, when you're operating in the first, second, and third layer of consciousness, in that first density of consciousness, and you do it with the physical, the mental, and the emotional experience together, that if I'm remembering right, the density said that was in a sense a boost to the fourth, the next layer of consciousness. And what you just described with Richard saying allow, embrace, accept, melt into the wholeness of it, was what the density of consciousness said in just different terms. So beautiful.
Yeah, and this, as we're kind of discussing all of these various languages and the way that we can express the same reality, and what's been what I've been very aware of this year is the collective awareness of lightness and darkness, and how there's been such a great deal of self-identification with one or the other. And both in terms of the self, so the aware self, the conscious self, and the shadow self.
Mm-hmm.
When we use that terminology, oftentimes we think of, the aware conscious self, that's the best part of me. The shadow self, those are those parts of me that are not so good. Those are the bad parts of me that sometimes rear their ugly head when I lose control. And when I think of this in terms of like thinking of it from this more, that makes a lot of sense from a 3D perspective, because duality is an experience of opposites. And so naturally, we would experience things that way. But when I think about creation and the process of light being created, every Genesis story across the world begins with light of some sort, or there's waters or sound, and then light was shown across it. Well, the sound is the darkness, and the light goes across it. And when we look at these energies from a scientific component, what we come up with is electrical and magnetic, or masculine and feminine, the way we've been understanding these experiences. And when we do that separation move of saying like, oh, well, the light is the good stuff and the dark is the bad stuff, we're actually like, we are denying our own inherent nature of oneness. Whether that's, you see that as yourself as one with the universe, or you see that as a sort of, as I am part of humanity, which is one experience going on in the universe, or you are exploring that experience through marriage or relationships and business. When you combine two businesses, that's a marriage. And there's leaders in business, and there are receivers in business, and same thing in our relationships with people that we love and care about. And so I guess, one of the things that I'm really excited about our experience moving into is that we can look at these various languages, whether it's, I believe in the political right, but an evolved one, or I believe in the political left, yes, an evolved one, or I use the gene keys, or I use some other method of understanding myself, that we can begin to experience these varieties of languages from a standpoint of, rather than seeing it in that concept of the things that are right for me are the light, and that's what's good, and the things that are not in resonance with me are darkness, and that's bad. I don't want to pay attention to that anymore. I'm excited about light and darkness beginning to share space and unification, where we can be, in terms of quantum consciousness, we're going to become not aware of just ourselves and the matter of our being, but also the 99.99999% of the space that is holding those cells together.
Mm.
And for me, that's what's really exciting, because it feels like such a leap forward in awareness.
Mm.
You know, where there's no longer the resistance to the experiences that we don't prefer.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that we're moving into a place where we're going to experience a bunch of what we don't want. I think plenty of people are getting that at the moment. You know, like people lost their jobs, people have been getting sick. Any number of things have been going on in this unusual year that most people don't like. But I think if we're able to incorporate some of this, you know, whether it's through Gene Keys and human design, where you embrace and you accept your experience, you know, or it's through some other methodology, you know, we can begin to experience more of the wholeness of all that we're creating, and by doing so, learn to guide it more skillfully, learn to create more in resonance with the truth of our essence. It's just, yeah, it's an incredible time, and I'm so excited to be able to have this conversation with both of you and with everyone who's listening. Who, from this quantum perspective, you are each, whether you're listening live now or in the future, you are contributing your own desire to the direction of our conversation. You know, like, we're like, okay, well, let's talk about science today. You know, or let's talk about whatever topic we're going to say. And here we are, you know, nearly an hour into the conversation, and we haven't even asked Simone to tap into the intelligence yet. We're just like getting excited about the ideas around what we're doing. And yeah, I love it. I am loving it.
Well, are we ready? Did we want to see what the density of consciousness has to say to us today? What?
I would love to hear from this intelligence today.
All right, let's do this. Bella, you have anything before we tap in? You good? I would like to communicate with archetype of the soul, the density of consciousness for layers 4, 5, and 6. Will you please communicate with us? Yes, there's nothing we would like more. We are ready to open the door and share with you more. The word oneness flew out, but I feel like it's more than oneness. It's just that that's the word they can give me to describe what they're saying, the totality, the wholeness, the infiniteness, the unendingness of us, of you. And let us begin. We want you to know that we are contemplating your progress, that we are observing the wisdom. They showed it to me in a picture, like we had the conversation a month ago, and it's like it's in the pool. And they showed it to me as the wisdom came in, and they're watching it just by being in the field with us, the vibration of it radiating out. And they said, you see, it was a great experiment for us too. We were ready to see how that consciousness, that dimensional vibration that we shared, to see how it was embraced, what it stirred, how it moved within the field. And so we were also in the middle of a grand experiment. And we appreciate your listening to us. What we have, they're using a word, they're using like a conglomeration of words that start with C. Let me see if I can get it. It's like what we have concerned, concluded, capitalized on, like they're mushing a bunch of C words together. Is that you're ready to move forward in consciousness, that many of you are ready for oneness, from the come from, like springing forth from a new, they showed it to me on multiple screens, but it was like come from, and then they showed me basically what we know of as a seed, and the moment that seed burst with life, you know, that little green spout comes up from the seed. So they notice that we are ready to spring from the seed of oneness. And they say, we would like to assist you in this. And then the first thing they show me is it's almost like we're scrubbing down. We're being scrubbed down. Makes me think of when I go to the Korean women's spa and they just, you know, scrape all the dead skin off of you. But it's like it's like a scrubbing down is needed. Deprogramming, desensitizing, which I find an interesting word that they chose. It's like it's like a desensitizing to the resistance to oneness, because we've been programmed in polarity, duality, and in a sense it's antithetical to earth consciousness to be in a come from of oneness. We're almost an anomaly in a world of duality, polarity. They say we would go as far as electromagnetics. They say we do not wish to go as far as masculine and feminine. And then they show me, like, at the moment of birth, the two circles becoming the Visca Pisces and then splitting into the four. They are somehow tying the terms masculine and feminine to this whole germination process. They say that we're unlike amoeba in that sense, and you're not single-celled organisms, that, you know, that there's this process, and it is a geometry, the unfolding geometry. And yet, the geometric unfolding in oneness is different. And the best way I can describe the difference is it's almost like looking at a flower of life in a flat version versus a multi-dimensional version. It's quantum in a sense. And they say, we want you to hold yourselves in the place of love. Imagine that birthing process occurring in the heart. instead of the womb. Just move the whole process up into the heart. They say that the heart is a place of neutrality, and that's because they're like, people are going to want to know why we moved it from the womb to the heart. And they're saying because we're moving it into a space of neutrality. And that from the neutrality, it moves beyond male and female to the integrated place, the inseparability of masculine and feminine, which relates to, John, what you were talking about in terms of light and dark. So the inseparability of that. And that's why we choose the heart for the birthing of oneness. The heart space, the energy of the heart. And in this place of neutrality is oneness. And so birthing from oneness, oneness. And they say that this is what we wish to say to you. This is our wisdom that we wish to share with you this evening. Last time we worked with them, they showed me out to the year 2067. So the wisdom they brought through last time was very distinct. It was 2067. They were saying to me, we are bringing to you the wisdom that will be lived in 2067. And now what they just showed me is that they're bringing forth the vibration of 2087. So, not that we are linear, because they're not, but they have this understanding of Earth timeline that they're showing me. And they say, but you can choose to live in 2067 right now. You can choose to live in 2087 right now. You don't have to wait for the others or anyone. You can just, bring it in. And now they say, we wish to receive your questions, for we know you have few and many. Okay.
Bella, do you have something to start off with, or?
Yeah, but maybe you feel even more eager to start off. In that case, please start off. I mean, I do have one thing, and that's moving the birth process from the womb, from the sacral energy, from the lower chakras to the higher chakras, where there's something shown to me that there is DNA. There's DNA in the density of where we are as humanity now, and the womb is where all density basically comes from. That it's really threaded in density in DNA, and the way that we move it up to a more subtle vibration, we don't have that intangible density. So the heart, in a way, it's beyond DNA. It's beyond something that needs to mutate. So we are in a place of neutrality, because we don't have to go in the densest part where we have to wait for all the conditions right for that quantum leap in DNA to happen. So for me, it feels like it's so simple in a way, because we're just like moving the process, and then suddenly it's basically like the same thing of gravity. Here on Earth, we have gravity, and we have to deal with that. And I always do. I stand on my head every morning because I'm kind of playing with it. But if we go out in outer space, that is not a condition anymore. And then it changes. Everything that we do from that place changes. So, yeah, that's...
When you were talking, they showed me, the reason I shook my head is because, so they see the lower chakras as first, second, and third, and the upper chakras as fifth, sixth, and seventh, and the heart is a 0 point field. right between them. That's what they showed me. So just adding that in to what you were saying.
Yeah, and there's just that thing, like this is the way we can choose timelines too. It's like we are beyond DNA. This heart is beyond DNA. And it's also why I say, like in normal terms, when I speak about love, and people might be like, oh, why about this is new age misunderstanding that love is all about that pink cloud. But no, love is the 0 point, it's the still point. And it's so voracious because that neutrality is oneness. So anything in comparison to that oneness can't win, because the only truth in a way is oneness. So there's also a kind of distinction of what love is here that is so important, I think, for human beings to understand, because it's easy to misunderstand love. And I feel like they're highlighting and making us feel into what love really is. And that makes me so happy, because I think part of like my mission this lifetime is to shine light on a new perception of love is so much more powerful, and what makes it possible to know that love is stronger than anything, and not just like a cliche, but as a science. That's the science of love is what I feel like they are showing us, and that makes me warm. That makes me, I feel transmutation in myself as this is coming through.
Love it. John, do you have questions?
Yeah, it's interesting, Bella, that you express all of those things in the way that you do, mostly because I feel very similarly in terms of what am I here to do, and in terms of the heart space being a neutral space. With the people that I work with, the first thing that most people say to me after experiencing the shift in their perspective is, I never thought that neutrality would be like this. It starts off feeling like I've not achieved what I'm after. It starts off feeling as if this is nothing. I need that charge of aliveness. And once they kind of remain in that space for a little longer, they begin to experience the aliveness that's possible through neutrality. And they begin to experience the vibrancy of that experience. And I love the picture that they've shown, in the yogic method of observing the chakras. The heart chakra is a combination of the upward and the downward triangles, and they're meeting in that's also known as the Star of David, however you want to call it. But to think that the heart is that center line between these two sets of three, it's quite an interesting perspective. But Bella brought up this idea of DNA, and that's actually the entry point into my understanding of this work and my experience of this work, which began through DNA activation. And so what I'm curious about from the soul intelligence is about the perspective on DNA, and what is DNA to the soul, and is there a way to understand DNA in a more expansive manner than we currently do with our two-strand awareness that we as a collective have?
Well, they first they started laughing when you started asking the question, and then they started turning the DNA inside out. It's like we don't even begin to know the beginning of DNA.
Mm-hmm.
And they really just like took a DNA molecule and they just kind of turned it inside out. And then, you know, it's like, you know, when you get a sleeping bag, you take it out and then you're like, how did all this come out of this little thing? That's what it looked like. It's like when they took what's inside DNA out, it's like, what? How did that doesn't, you know, fit. But then what they did was they it all came out and it was like, oh my gosh, you know, how did all of that come out of there? And they were saying, they were laughing, they were saying we don't even begin to know about DNA. And then it started looking like the first image I got was almost like beams of light, but then it reminded me of like what some talk about as 12 strands of DNA. There were a bunch of streaming lines coming out. And then they showed me a mathematical calculation that it's like if we think of DNA as X, DNA is really like this huge calculation, this algorithm of sorts, and they flashed that to me. So again, the contrast of what we think it is and what it really is. It's much more expansive than what we have identified it as. And they are talking about it as like seeds. So they shifted from the math metaphor to like seeds. I asked them, I said, what do you really want us to know about DNA? And they said, we want you to know that it is more than what you think and know it is. And it will be unfurling. That ties back to those first images. And that when it starts unfurling, you're not going to be able to get it back in the box.
We can't go back to where we came from.
And they're talking about how it relates to consciousness. That they were saying that you tie DNA to physical form, but it is related to consciousness. So when they showed me again mathematical calculations, and it reminds me of sometimes when I see the underlying energy of everything, I start to see a matrix, if you will, and then I'll start to just see maths, just calculation after calculation. And when that starts to happen, I'll just start saying what I can say, because there are symbols or things that I don't even know, you know, and I'll just say, well, that thing I don't know, and then I keep going on. And so when they're showing me this, it's like there's the underlying calculation of everything, right? And that it relates to both physical and non-physical. And they say that would be the big discovery, that once you make the scientific understanding that it ties to beyond the physical vessel, to consciousness, that's what's truly groundbreaking in terms of DNA.
So essentially, there is non-physical DNA.
Indeed.
That we have the possibility of exploring.
And they're saying that the non-physical DNA is embedded in the physical DNA.
Mm.
And they say that we don't yet have the instruments to detect that. But it's coming. It will come.
Okay, so I have a follow-up question. Is Simone's gift in her ability to contact this soul intelligence the results of the expression of non-physical DNA?
Indeed, yes, and it goes beyond that. It is her capacity for vibration plus space. So they're giving me a calculation with words and figures. It's like vibration plus space, and then some symbol I don't know, non-judgment neutrality, and some other signal. Now it looks like a sentence, like when you used to diagram sentences. So then from there, they say like non-judgment neutrality, vocabulary, and focus. So they give this calculation of me in numbers and words. And they said, we would tell you, but we don't think she'll believe it to transcribe it to you. They say that they go, she's modest with her gift. They say that you don't think that she can communicate with the next density of consciousness because she's in physical form and she's not crystalline. She has the capacity to connect with the crystalline consciousness, and therefore she can interpret the crystalline consciousness when you're ready for the next communication with the next density of consciousness, which, by the way, we will be with you.
Mm-hmm.
And then they show me a picture of like that density of consciousness, and it's almost like they boost us. They put us on the construct, the geometry of this density of consciousness, and they lift us to the crystalline consciousness. So they say when you're ready, but they say you're not ready yet because you have much exploring here to do. We could talk to you for years. And, they say, like, don't rush it. We have tons to talk about. We have a lot to talk about. And they're just really, it's just like this exuberance for the capacity, the openness to have the conversation. And to be, they just showed us our physical vessels for people who are showing up for this conversation. We are literally changing our DNA. We're opening up to the non-physical DNA by simply having the conversation. And they're like, people pay money to change their DNA. All you have to do is show up and have a conversation. Like, we're really changing our DNA. And they show it to me by showing us all three of our vessels, and the vessels of the physical vessels of people who join us in this conversation, whether they're joining us in the past, in the present, or in the future, whenever. And they show me how our bodies become more transparent and crystalline through the engagement with the consciousness. And they say they're delighted by the opportunity. They say there are a lot of people who would like this conversation, but they don't know how to get there or what to do. And they appreciate our ingenuity in speaking with them. They say, what more would you like to explore?
I have a question. So I am seeing, well, the spirals. So when they were saying there is non-physical DNA, and that's embedded in the physical DNA. And I know I've been saying for years and years, I know the physical body is the portal. Like, I knew that we start from the densest density, and that's the portal. And that's the same thing when they're saying we will be with you when we're speaking to the next density. So 4, 5, 6 is the stepping stone to 7, 8, 9, and what comes after. So I'm starting to see the spiral movement where we start from the densest. So I would like to hear if they can speak to the spiral architecture of existence, basically.
Yeah, they're showing me pictures of it. It almost looks like string theory to me, that are fractaled spirals. It almost to me looks like, you remember when we were kids and we had those slinky toys, and if you like twisted it too much, it would like become this kind of ball. Or it also, the words Buckminster Fuller flew out in terms of words, like the geometries that he was playing with. Well, they say that he was a genius ahead of his time, but he hadn't even gotten quite to the geometries that you're describing. But that was like a stepping stone to what you're describing. And they say this is unfolding quickly, this awareness of this spiral technology. And that, of course, you're futuristic in your perception. And then they showed it to me starting from the 0 point field, which now I'm relating to the heart, or the space where the lower and upper chakras join. And they show that spiral technology birthing from the 0 point field of the heart. And then they took me right back to that, the single cell, the Visca Pisces into the 4, and then, they say that there are numerous ways to birth spiral geometries. And yet they're all interconnected. And it is a very fractaled technology, so that even when we are aware that it's dimensional, exponentialize that. And then you might have a beginning understanding of the dimensions or layers of that geometry, movement, technology, potentiality. They said, once I said the word potentiality, they were like, okay, you captured it. So I'm like, okay. Mm-hmm. They feel that feels complete, because they're sitting there like complete, like content. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. I mean, I'm still curious, but I think, for this conversation, what we see again is that inclusion. Like the spiral is including everything else was before. It's not raising your frequency and not being that low. It's like, it's really include, and that's kind of how I was speaking about spiral dynamics before. Every cycle we can thread it with a little bit more love. And I realized, like, we are more grounded in the 0 point every wider round spiral that we take. That's how now it comes through when they say that that's where it comes from. So it's an awareness of this 0 point in the threading that makes expansion of awareness of consciousness, whether we speak about one person or a collective, or so yeah, I do really feel like it is giving us an understanding of the architecture of existence through what they were saying.
Mm-hmm.
I want to jump onto that. It was kind of coming up during the answer around the question of the spirals, because I've been studying the spiraling nature for some time, and it's come to my awareness that our creation, the reality that we experience, has a variety of spiraling technologies that are present at once. And that in the Bella, your description, it sounds so perfect, because during the answering, what I was seeing was a spiraling geometry that has been termed the Christos spiral, which is it is an exponential additive spiral, meaning with each geometry that's added to the spiral, it encompasses all of its previous wholeness. And that is in contrast to what is termed the Fibonacci spiral, which is a consumptive spiral. In order to create the next geometry of the furthering of the spiral, it consumes the previous two that it came from. And so what I'm wondering about, and these additive or consumptive spirals we can see in nature, whether we're looking at a flower, a pattern of the seeds in the sunflower, or we're looking at the shell of a snail. We see these patterns in our nature, in our reality. Is there a fundamental difference between the consumptive spiral technologies and the additive technologies that encompass all that comes before?
They say it begins with come from. That the come from of the infinite spirals, the ones that encompass the wholeness of before, that the come from of it is different than the come from of the Fibonacci, the golden mean. They say that the purpose of the golden mean was a measure of space, time, and consciousness. And that the spirals, as you describe them, it's really more of a fractal geometry.
Yes.
And so they say that the come from, therefore the purpose of those are different. And that they won't go so far as to say that they're not both measures, because there's an aspect of the all-encompassing that does measure to us, but that's not its purpose. And they say that with the golden mean, the purpose is this form of sacred measure and dimension in space-time. And that because human consciousness goes beyond the physical, the threading of spirals, the spirals that encompasses the whole and grows, is because it includes physical and non-physical quantumness. It is fundamentally different. And yet there are those who would say from Earth world that they are both measures. But they don't really see it like that. It's like they acknowledge that and that point of view, but for them it is different. Now they're showing me that whole quantum physics concept of if you are a point anywhere on the line, you are the line. If you are the butterfly flapping your wings, you are the breeze on the other side of the world. If you are a part of the whole, you are the whole. It is an awareness of the whole, the capacity for awareness of the whole. But the whole is already there, like in whatever dimension. So as you're threading it through, it's just you're becoming aware of that spiral. And all of the spirals are already there. It's just whether you're aware of it. That's why they said that's why we make the point of the spirals that thread wholeness is physical and non-physical. So it's just that you have this awareness, this ever increasing awareness. And for them, that's, the difference. With the Fibonacci, related to measuring in time and space, they're like, it's kind of like tit for tat. Okay, so some might claim, well, if I'm the point on the Fibonacci, I'm the end, but they understand that the way they explained it, some people might take, they might, want to have a discussion about that, but they feel like they've made their point.
From my personal perspective, I received the energetic answer that I was maybe looking for. I think oftentimes, at least when I ask questions, I don't know that I can speak for everyone, but oftentimes what I'm seeking from an answer is something that's energetic in nature. And when you describe the aspect of moving through the spiral, and even though you're focused as a point in the spiral, you are the entirety of the spiral at once. It allowed for the whatever energy of that answer in my relationship to my own spiral, I could feel it descending into my body. I could feel the energetic transmission of that, of the awareness of the truth of that idea. And
yeah, they show me that in they flash back to your vessel, and like if your vessel of transparency was like this, then it's like bigger, there's more transparency. So they're acknowledging your integration of that for all of us. They're also kind of making jokes with our transparencies because they started showing them to us as quantum. So I was kind of seeing them as one-dimensional, and they started showing them to me like, and they're laughing. They're having fun. It's funny. Funny. I would love for them to talk to us about this whole thing about soul level senses.
Yeah.
And let me see if they'll say something to us about. They go, of course you would. They say because you're already experiencing multidimensional sensing, quantum sensing. So they say, well, in your world, there are many children coming in with, and they say that I'm quite aware of this, with quantum sensing, where they have such awareness that you're autist, what you call many of the beings who are autistic, and have they say they don't have collapsed senses, and by that I think they mean like what we know as regular senses tied to physical form, because they're showing me how some children with super skills can have, it's like they have hearing that's like a superpower. They can hear the jet, 20 miles out, or they can feel the blade of grass blowing in the wind. They can literally sense the butterfly on the other side of the world. And so they say that part of what you're talking about is this supra skills, but they said we know you're really asking what's beyond that. And as an example, they're showing me something that I frequently experience, where I'll say I'm quadriclarient, that I can hear, see, feel, and know vibration. And that's really a simplistic way of saying it, because many times I'm receiving the vibration multi-sensory at once. And they say that gets more to what soul level senses are. There is a transparency in soul level senses.
Perhaps an analogy that I could offer and see if this is an understanding of what they're suggesting. When engaging in the study of clairvoyance, which is psychic seeing, oftentimes those who are learning to begin to translate energy into visual, they will see in the same manner that we look with our two physical eyes, meaning kind of through this sort of tunnel vision in front of us. However, it's possible to develop 360-degree vision, able to see in all directions at once. Is that more similar to the idea that's being expressed? Is the difference between those things?
In a way, they say that when you were talking about the, like just seeing what's in front of you, basically earth vision, like what we know is regular seeing, they say that is such a primitive technology.
Yeah.
It's like the kindergarten technology.
Yeah.
And they rarely trust what humans see with their eyes. They find that very, very, very basic. And they said, oh, like we would never trust what just a human sees out of the eyes. The feeling of the vibration, they're showing me an instance from a very long time ago. It just happens to be a session. Sometimes I'll remember sessions for forever. And I remember I was working with a client, and I started to see this white bird that looked like an eagle. And I was describing it for my client. I was like, it's like an eagle because it's white, and its white head looks like an eagle, but it feels like a falcon. But my eyes couldn't say white falcon. And so they're showing us that as an example, that I didn't go with what I saw, and I didn't discount what I felt, but it was the multidimensionalness. And they say in terms of soul consciousness, there is no separation between hearing, seeing, knowing, feeling, that it is one. And that is the ultimate, because it is transparent. It is, they say in terms of earth consciousness, they point me to the times of Lemuria or rainbow people, where essence, the form was almost essence, and that the beings were fully transparent. There was no discrepancy in vibration to what they were experiencing and what others experienced. That there was complete transparency is the best word to have it. And they're saying that's soul level senses, is the transparency of in a sense, it's like there's no division, right? There's no separation.
Yeah, it's almost as if one of the elements that I feel we're integrating from this answer in particular, but also many answers that have been offered to our questions, is the integration of the perspective of unified consciousness. And I'm wondering, many of the mystics in our history, whether they were yogic or Buddha or these variety of different ways, is the experience that sort of experience of oneness with everything. Is that the primary perspective of this region of the soul consciousness? Or is that even moving beyond the soul consciousness perspective? These varieties of experiences described variously as, some people call it enlightenment. Some, there are many different definitions within yoga for the various layers of this experience. I'm curious about the soul perspective of this experience in particular.
Well, I lost you on your question, but they started showing me pictures. And one of the pictures they showed me was, I believe you were talking about monks, because I was seeing a monk who could modulate the vibration to transparency and meld, in a sense, with, they were showing me the vibration of a dragonfly, of a flower, of grass, of air. So they could modulate their vibration in such a way that there is a transparency between, they create. They're now using the word a vibration of truth. And at first they were showing it to me in pictures as transparency. And that, say, a dragonfly actually has a transparency of vibration, a truth. There's truth in that vibration. And they can modulate these beings. There are people who can modulate to the vibration of transparency. They're saying that she works like that, which I wouldn't have been able to say to you to transcribe before when you were asking, and they say that it looks different ways when different peoples do it. They say your native peoples have actually shapeshifted, and that required them to modulate to transparency and then into a different physical form. So these are all techniques in that that realm. Whatever you asked, I'm hoping that I'm getting the fullness of the answer from the the density.
That's pretty interesting.
It's interesting to watch on film.
In the film going on in your mind?
Yeah, I see things in film sometimes, like screens, and sometimes they have multiple screens playing, so I'm looking at all the screens. So just trying to get everything they're saying.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Now they're teasing me, like they show everything as a screen. Like they're just they're laughing. They're saying you're not separate from all of that. It's just that your awareness in your earth form is usually more focused than that on the screen in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
Do they feel like we got our portion for today, or do they have anything else they want to share with us? I feel like we had quite a lot to contemplate.
They were like, well, actually, it was kind of more than what they intended, but we asked good questions, you see.
I kept wanting to piggyback on Bella's questions because they were so good, and they led into these other areas that I was interested in. And I thought, like, well, is there going to be another time when I'm going to like bring up this thing about spirals? I don't know.
They say ask away. If you have more questions, ask, because they're willing.
I feel pretty personally. I feel pretty good at the moment. It's always enjoyable to have discussion with this awareness level.
They just beamed oneness to us, like the vibration of oneness, and I could literally feel it in my field. It was so powerful. They're showing me it resonated, like flowing through y'all's fields. And they go, yes, and the field of anyone who participates that, in your conversation, that you it's for all, actually, beyond what we can see. And I'm just saying thank you to them. And they were like, you guys know where to find us, so come back and visit. So I'm just saying thank you, and I appreciate you guys. Any concluding comments or thoughts or insights?
Do you want to go, John? It feels like you have something.
Sure. I was just thinking about how our discussions each time, they often focus on a specific theme of some sort or another. Whether we are focused in that direction particularly at the outset or not, there's some kind of an energetic awareness that becomes made more available by the discussion. And in our rather lengthy, compared to previous we've had some conversations about the architecture where we didn't engage Simone and her gift with this intelligence. But in today's, we spent quite a bit of time just discussing, allowing our discussion, it seemed to flow in this direction of how do we, towards the question of how do we experience oneness from within a physical body?
Mm-hmm.
and in our discussion of the light and the dark, and just the searching for answer. I mean, it even came up in our discussion with you, Simone, how I said, like, you're not in it for the answers necessarily, because the vibrational experience is already with you. What I'm feeling from our discussion today, you know, like in previous discussions, I've felt this in one of our recent, maybe our most recent conversation, I felt this overwhelming feeling of the presence of love that was being beamed into us and transmitted, really. And in this conversation, it has all been around this idea of oneness and the experience of unification, and down to these last description of, you know, the question was essentially, Simone, around enlightenment, or what yogis call samadhi. And you know, the answer was around human beings who have learned to modulate their vibration to experience their oneness with another object of experience. And I just very much appreciate the expansion of the discussion that the three of us and everyone who joins to listen and comment are able to create. It's really a beautiful co-creative experience, and I'm continually amazed by the results.
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing everything in kind of parallels of what we're speaking about today, where we're speaking about the portals, like the lowest frequency being the portal to like each of the realms. So somehow I see that our conversation from the beginning is part of a portal, and there are people that are seeing this physical body as too, like, just too simple, or like just too stupid almost to be the portal, because it's just the physical body that's going to die anyway. You know, we have those judgments about it, so we don't see how amazing it is of a portal into the mystery and the wisdom. And I feel like something similar with our conversation today is just a conversation that seemed to kind of like, where is it going? I was saying I have no expectations today. I feel so relaxed, and it's like, do you have the curiosity to stay with it, so that you can be there an hour later when we get into like the real, you know, that intelligence we knew was there, but we didn't have an agenda in getting there. We were just allowing the conversation to go. And that's part of too, like, who is it in this world that's going to discover the jewels? It's the person who can be with it, even when something is not happening. I know that there was something with that where we're saying, oh, at the beginning it just looks like this, but then it starts to unfold and then everything comes out. So I think there is something with patience when it comes to the 0 point, because neutrality can look boring, but actually when you stay with it, it's magical. So that's the first thing that I can see today. And
I
it's
want
like,
to
yeah.
say, before you go on to the second thing, I have to say, they actually said that to me, and I didn't say it. So right before I started to, you know, when I was tapping in, my eyes saw the time, and the human part of me went, oh, that's a long time to be patient to get to this conversation. And the density said to me, we had you wait. Like, they are wanting to see who is going to have the patience for that. I mean, they said it to me, and then there you go bringing it up, because that was one of the few things I didn't translate in the conversation. Okay, sorry. Yeah. So keep going.
No. Thank you for confirming that. Mm-hmm. And that's again confirming for me, which part of my challenge has been the body and understanding why it's not just a negative thing to have to be in this restricted vehicle. And then it's taken me decades to start to see the magic. So it's just, yeah, it's confirming that kind of patience, not only patience, but also the curiosity to stay with it, because we are tapping in together when we do stay with it. And the other part goes back to the science of it that we started with. So it's just like making one example where you're speaking about awarenesses and the way that this multi-awareness coming. So it's coming back to even the autism. So many things we can use the science of human design when we speak about it. So we were speaking, I think it's 2 times ago, where we said we started in instinctual awareness, and then we go up to the Ashna awareness, to the Ashna center. And that's basically when you're speaking about the visual and how the focus has been the visual and just see that, and then now we're going to the mutation of the emotional and how we have this sentient, awareness. So basically the science of what we're speaking about is there, but I feel like with this conversation, you can understand what's happening in the body graph. And even we have been, you and I, Simone, with Tim diving into the tonal, the colors and the tones. And the tonals is all about the binaries of sensing. There's just something here to say that even what was spoken today, it can seem like so vast in a way. There is also a formula, like we were speaking about the algorithm or the equation. So there is a very scientific, it's there to kind of just showing us, like we were saying in the beginning, when you were out, John, we're just saying that there is a science for it. It's just like it's about time, till our human awareness can kind of map it out. And I was just feeling that the science is there, and the more ways we can speak about it. And that's what I feel today. When we can have these kind of a relaxed conversation about it, and I add my languages. Simone, you have a double, like you have like many languages, wherever you're taking from. John as well. It's like, yeah, then suddenly we're painting the picture. And then we have both the left brain and the right brain, and both of them and beyond. And that's what becomes so exciting, because we can just paint the picture in not a tunnel vision, but in that 360. And that's why I am so excited about not feeling, I feel regenerated after 2 hours with you. And then I know that what we are doing is, and then I know that what we're doing is adding. And I also love the fact the stepping stones. Transparency came up like also spontaneously a while ago, and now transparency is used all the time. And since we went through the foundation of transparency means, now we can use it as a normal world, and it's not complicated. It's like, I love the stepping stones, and I love their respect for our human consciousness that kind of needs the stepping stone. So thank you.
Yeah, that was super. I mean, for me tonight, that last question you asked, John, and getting to see, I'll probably never forget that image and the feeling within me of seeing the beings modulate to transparency. That was just really stunning. And also for me tonight, also like mind-blowing and stunning, was them showing the DNA, the question about the DNA, and then just showing us that what we think DNA is. It's really, it's what's inside of, the inside of what we know is DNA. And there's so much more that we could possibly know, and that DNA is non-physical, and related to consciousness. I mean, and just seeing that, and I guess I guess a better way to describe it for me is having the soul level sense of it, because it wasn't just seeing, it was feeling the vibration within my body. And I love, like at the end when they sent us all the vibration, and I actually feel it in my own vessel, and then I see it move through y'all's, and then they give me the affirmation. They already know where my consciousness is going, that if anybody who, before, during, past, present, or future watches this, that they receive the vibration, that, and to have the soul level sensation of experience of that was really stunning. I'm just so grateful to be with you guys at the table, to have these conversations. It's so awesome. And I feel like, John, that you, at the beginning, you didn't know it, but you were giving me a gift. And it was when you were talking about how neutrality can feel like this is nothing. Because, recently, I know there are a lot of people out there who are going through their layers of consciousness, whatever layer they're choosing to experience. And for me, I've been contemplating on this, that my life feels so, it's not that it's nothing, but that I'm still, that there is so much stillness that I feel like I'm not moving. And, the human part of me judges that. And when I heard you say that, I was like, oh, but you are experiencing oneness, and thus the neutrality, thus the perfection, of each moment. So that was a real gift to me. Thank you for that.
I was so touched by that too. It's touched me so deeply, and it has that, it has the quality of bliss, and to have bliss recognized, although bliss is almost still to the eye, but in bliss there is so much movement. So I was so touched by that confirmation as well. It was a gift for me as well.
Yeah, because at that soul level, so much of my life I am experiencing a soul level of sensation, and there is such a stillness to it, and a bliss, and a peacefulness, and a timelessness, and a boundlessness, and those are so tied to my profile, and from the human, that has been conditioned by duality or whatever. I sometimes, beat myself up for the thing that I'm intending to achieve, right? And then I'm achieving it, and I don't even know. And I'm like, what are you doing? You're not doing anything, So it was a real gift. Thank you.
I'm really glad you're able to receive that. That human experience, when just before you started sharing that, I was thinking, I love how our conversation is making evolution, spiritual evolution, into a process that isn't something to be achieved. Where we can have the experience we're having, no matter how we're seeing it, no matter how we're judging it, no matter how we're perceiving it. And it can be a part of a natural process of expansion along this spiral of all that we are. And that it's not necessary for us to satisfy the desires of achievement in order to actually create fulfillment. That we can have fulfillment without needing to relate to achieving some goal or getting it right. This part is one of the things that I personally struggled with for such a long time in spiritual expansion is, am I doing it right? Am I there yet? Am I ever going to get there? In our conversation, even now, I'm relating to my current experience and feeling like, okay, what ways can I continue to expand? But even now in our conversation, I'm having the experience of more of like, this is like getting in a tube on on a stream in the springtime with my friends on a sunny afternoon, just kind of like enjoying the water as it passes by, and like here we are running down this stream of our experience, and having that awareness around living up to our potentials of are we doing enough to fulfill our mission here on earth. I just love that that's something that this conversation is contributing, you know, in a way. I mean, that's something that I really appreciate about it. So I'm glad you're able to have that feeling too.
Thank you. Well, you guys, I think we're there, unless y'all have something else to add. So thank you for joining us in this 5th episode of Architecture of the Soul, and look for us in the next 2 to 4 weeks, and we'll come back and have another evening at our table, and we hope that you will join us.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.